probably one of the meetings that many of our families and even our staff have been waiting for. The big question that is out there for our community is, how are we reopening schools? I'll start off by introducing myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Emmy Flores, and I'm the superintendent of schools. I'm going to go ahead and see if I could pull my screen because I have a presentation I want to share with you. Let me see what I can do here. Of course, when I want to share my screen, I have a little bit of trouble. Okay, thank you for bearing with me. Let me pull this down a little bit. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Some of you who have been involved in some of our committees probably seen some of these slides, but overall our community has not. And first and foremost, I want to thank our community for their patience. I know that as a parent myself, that this is the one thing that we're waiting for. As parents, we want to know what's going to happen because ultimately the education of our children depends, and even the health to a great degree depends on how our schools are moving forward. So hopefully you're able to see my screen there. I just want to go over the meeting agenda. I'm going to go briefly through this. There are some parts of this presentation that I want to spend more time on. And as you can see here, we have a lot of information to provide for you, not just talking to you about the goals of the reopening of schools, the guiding principles, and our process and the committee, the work that we're actually doing. But information as to how we will get input from our stakeholders, as well as where can you find ongoing communication. Before moving forward, a couple of things. One, many of you might have questions, and we had over 1,100 people sign up for this meeting. Unfortunately, Zoom allows us to have 500, and so everybody else is being redirected to a YouTube channel that is taking place at the same time. And so we hope that everybody's able to submit their questions. Now on Zoom, as you know, you have a feature there where you take notes. And so if you have questions, please add them there. Because of the number of people who are at this meeting, we are now going to be able to answer your questions. But what we will do is take your questions, and if you provide an email address on your question, we will email you an answer. But no, even if you don't, our plan is to take your question and add it to our website under the Q&A question, because the same question you have is likely the same question that many, many people have. And so please feel free to add your questions on the sideline there, and we will take all those questions and turn them into a Q&As. Now, because of the length of this actual presentation, there may not be a lot of time for input. This is a new setting for me as well, trying to get used to conducting big meetings, important meetings like this in a Zoom setting is not ideal for me. I'm a person who likes to connect with people, and seeing you through a screen is not the same, but you know, I think this is better than nothing. So thank you again. All right, so I want to talk first about the elephant in the room. I think a lot of parents here ultimately want to know, if I don't feel comfortable sending my child to school, will you offer the option for families to keep their kids at home, and will you be offering online distance learning? Okay, so the picture here is a picture of a child, and you know, as a parent of 3, I know very well that ultimately what I value the most in the world are my children, my husband too. But my children are everything to me, and I know that when you send your child to school, you are trusting us. You're trusting us that we're going to keep your child safe. You're trusting that we will do the very best to educate them. And as we are living through this COVID era, the question of health and safety is way up there for all of us parents. And so with that understanding that child safety is a parent's #1 priority, we are going to make sure that parents who wish to keep their children home, who do not want to send them to school will be offered the opportunity to have their children continue with distance learning as an option. So I want to get that out there because I think that's, as I'm hearing from families, as I get emails, this is the number one question that we're hearing. Now, our survey results, and you see the 15% there, I apologize, it should have been inside, but 15% of our families have told us from our survey results that they will not be sending their kids to school. No matter what we do, they do not feel that the environment is safe. They don't want to take the risk. And 30% of our parents have told us that they're not sure. When I look at that number 30 and 15, that's really 45% of our families who do not feel comfortable. So knowing that as a district, we feel very strongly that we need to provide some options. And more information will be coming to you, families, because we will need to identify the exact families, exact students. What are we talking about to be able to tailor to the needs of our community? So in talking about the reopening of schools, there are districts that have come out with their plans already. They came out early with their plans. Our goal in Evergreen School District is that when we are looking at something as huge as this, just like we did at the when we were looking at the closing of schools, that we truly engage our community, that we listen to what our stakeholders have to say. What do our parents have to say? What do our employees have to say? What do kids have to say about this? And also that as we are creating plans, that we are listening to those voices, and that we're also taking the best current thinking that many people have. I will tell you that there is no playbook for this. There is no district that I know in this country that has this figured out completely. We're all trying to accomplish the same thing. And the challenge for us is that not only is there no playbook, but the rules keep changing. And so as we get new guidance, we find out perhaps throughout the day that that has shifted. And that's been pretty frustrating because ultimately we want to create a plan that that we can move forward with. And it's very difficult when the rules can keep changing. But today we had some information that came from the Public Health Department as well as the County Office of Education and in collaboration with the California Department of Education. And this information I'll share a little bit more later on in this presentation. And you will see that today was very key in helping us have the guidance we need to move forward. But ultimately, as we develop a plan for reopening our schools, these are the top goals that we have. Goal, this plan must address the question, how do we keep students and employees safe? That's got to be up there as the number one goal. The question two, how do we reopen schools under various circumstances? We also know that we're going to have to shift at any point. If conditions worsen and we have a model where kids are coming in and all of a sudden we have to shut down, we need to be able to pivot. So how do we create a plan where we're able to adapt our learning environment to the various circumstances? And how do we create an equitable learning environment for all students under any circumstances? So ultimately, those are the goals. Now, the factors that we are considering as we move forward, of course, public health risks. What is it that our public health is telling us, and to what extent can the health of our students, our staff and families, and the general population be safeguarded while opening schools? That's our number one priority. In terms of the impact on learning and student achievement, making sure that our plans take consideration that, for example, if we are on distance learning, we saw the challenges we had. This is a new mode of learning, paradigm shift, that we're able to maximize student learning through the use of leveraging the use of technology. And quite frankly, all districts have this as an area of growth. So do we, okay? And ability to safeguard schools, that goes very well with the public health risk. To what extent are we prepared to reopen with the right safety measures in place? All the things that we know we're supposed to do we have them? Have we planned as a district for all the equipment that we're going to need to keep our families and our students and our our staff safe. And I say families because ultimately kids go home and kids have their families. And so they could very well be carry something. We want to be sure that we're maximizing safety measures. And this part, flexibility, to what extent are we prepared to offer learning options for students whose families may not want 100 online distance learning for many reasons. One of those reasons being that they're concerned for the safety of their children. And in many occasions, I've heard from families who say, well, I'm not as concerned about my young child because there's data. This is something that I've heard. There's data to support that perhaps they're not going to get sick. However, we have grandparents in the home, and I'm very concerned that grandma and grandpa will get ill. Those are real concerns that we need to address, and we need to allow parents to have that flexibility. Now, we need to have a plan for any circumstance. And as I share with you, we're aiming to engage our stakeholders and to vet the viability of any of the options that we have. And we aim to adapt to our learning environments. And of course, budget is always up there. But I got to tell you, we will not compromise the safety of our students, the safety of our staff and our families for budget. So, but we're also very mindful that we got to be able to balance our books. So here are some stages of reopening, which I want to share with you. And you will see that, well, let me just talk to you a little bit about the guiding principles before I actually go into the different models. These are the guiding principles. A lot of this information you've heard already in previous slides, but I can't overestimate that the health and safety of our students and our staff is a huge priority. That is a guiding principle. The flexibility, our ability to provide reasonable accommodations to individual students and families and employees in response to their unique situations, that's a guiding principle. And then this one here, the social emotional well-being. This is something that we notice with our children. Isolation, feeling of isolation, lots of children reporting sadness, trouble with a new learning environment. We need to make sure that as we move forward, that we are able to support the social emotional well-being of our students, including our staff and our community. Not only that, beyond COVID, we've had social racial unrest across the country. And so our children's state of well-being may not be optimal, and we can't ignore that. And of course, learning, providing high quality instruction that is aligned with California state standards. How do we ensure that children continue to be provided with high quality of instruction? Our parents, many of them have moved into an area for the reason that they love their schools, they love the education that their children get, and we want to continue to keep that trust from our families and community. There's what's the path to reopening schools? A lot of work is taking place already. In early spring and even now, we are continuing to engage our stakeholders and solicit input that will inform decisions about schedules, preferences, concerns, and protocols. And as well as now we are preparing our facilities and school sites to reopen. We are ensuring operations to support an organized transition plan for instructional models, and we are ensuring ongoing and regular communication. We're continuing to engage stakeholders, and you will see that we will continue to have many opportunities for you to get more information. We'll have a focus group and a website that will provide lots of information so that you as families and our staff who is joining us is always in the know. And then, of course, late summer, providing professional development, the training that our staff needs on instructional technology, also looking at it, social emotional learning and safety procedures, providing webinars on safety measures to our parents as well, to our families and our students and our staff, and then reopening. So some of the priorities, as I've mentioned before, these are our top priorities: instruction, how do we engage students, and the options that we will be providing. Technology, ensuring that our students have the technology necessary. We saw in the last 3 months that we had families that didn't have internet connection. And it's not okay to say to them, well, too bad. That is not okay. And so we will continue to work with our families to make sure that every family, every child has a connection that they need to be able to engage in the schoolwork, as well as looking at devices and other technology tools that they have. This is something that's important to us. Wellness, I've mentioned this already, the need to address the social emotional learning, the safety and the health of our students and even our staff, our facilities, looking at cleaning, disinfecting, and the safety protocols that we will have in place, and communicating that to staff and to students and families. Operations, guidelines. What does transportation look like? What about visitors, volunteers? What are the rules around that? And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, communication, making sure that we have regular communication with all our stakeholders. And we may use mail, email, social media, our district website, any which way that we could communicate with our families as to what's going on so everybody's in the know. So these are the models that we are looking, and I do want to start with the last one. Schools open with no restrictions. Just know that this is not a consideration at this time, but one that we need to be prepared for in the future. Once, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed because it is my desire that this one day we'll be able to go back to our quote unquote normal. And so there's considerations for that as well. But the two that we are looking at right now is school opening in full online distance learning. That's a possibility. Also, schools opening in a blended learning format. So before moving on, I do want to share with you that today, and I mentioned a little bit about this earlier, the Health Department, in collaboration with the Santa Clara County Office of Education, had a webinar. And this was a very important webinar because we now have a reopening of Santa Clara County K-12 schools guide. And this is the guide that we've been waiting for, the guide that with the guidelines that we need to be able to move forward. So we're very pleased to have that. I'm going to give you an example of the things that this guide provides, the information. Know very well that even though this guide just came out, we've been doing a lot of work, but there were questions that we still had that were pretty much unanswered. And so not having enough information made it very difficult to plan forward in some areas. To give you an example, transportation. The question was, can we have, is there a requirement of 6 feet between students in the bus? That's a lot different than saying, in some counties we've seen that children can sit 2 to a seat. So if you could imagine 2 to a seat is a lot different than 6 feet apart. And so that has a huge impact on how we move forward. We finally have some guidance to answer those questions for us. That's just one simple example of how one small variable has such a huge impact on how we move forward with planning. So here are some examples. This guide gives us information on procedures, on social distancing, on arrival and departure, classroom settings. What does that look like? Non-classroom settings and out in the outside of the class. What is physical distancing? What are the requirements? Bus transportation. Here's something a little bit more specific. Some examples of physical distancing, and I'll read through these because I know not everybody is able to see this presentation and some are just calling in and can't see it. But these are examples: communicating with all staff and families regarding the physical distancing requirements and recommendations. Training of staff and students on protocols for physical distancing for both indoor and outdoor spaces. Another example, the posting of signage reminding students and staff about physical distancing in prominent locations throughout each school and campus. Allowing only necessary visitors and volunteers on the campus to limit the number of students and staff who come into contact with them. For outside organizations utilizing facilities outside of school hours, ensuring that they follow all required health and safety measures. So these are some of the examples, but not everything that we have to look at in our planning. There's also guidance on hygiene measures, such as face covering, such as all adults and students must wear cloth face coverings at all times while on campus, except while eating or drinking. And uh, for example, educating students, particularly young elementary students, on the rationale and proper use of face covering. It's not enough to say to a student, you must wear a face covering. We're going to see some resistance in some points, in some cases, and children maybe not fully understanding. So whereas before we just taught the rules on how do you behave out on the playground, how do you, walk through the hallways, when you go to the restroom, just some guidelines. Now our guidelines have to include face covering, things that we've never had to address before, social distancing, etc. And then of course, hand washing and other hygiene measures. Within that umbrella, we have things, guidance on how to, on teaching and reinforcing proper hand washing techniques. What's that going to look like? And ensuring adequate supplies to provide healthy hygiene behaviors, including soap, tissue, no-touch trash cans, etc. Moving on to other examples provided to us through that guide. I'm going to zoom through these a little bit quicker. Know that this presentation will also be available on our district website for anybody who wants to pull it and dig a little bit more into it. But in cleaning and maintenance, what are our routines? How often are we cleaning? And here's a recommendation: at least daily and more frequently if feasible, clean and disinfect, frequently touch hard surfaces such as tables and desks, chairs, door handles, light switches, phones, copy fax machines, etc., pursuant to CDC guidance. Food services, another area where we got more guidance today, following requirements regarding physical distancing. Some of these things we knew already we needed to do, and in some areas they've gone a little bit more into detail. Following the requirements issued by the County Department of Environmental Health to prevent transmission of COVID-19 in food facilities. And here are some recommendations, such as serving meals in classrooms or outdoors instead of cafeterias or groups dining rooms where practicable, and serving individually plated or bagged meals, avoiding sharing of foods and utensils in buffet or family style meals. Now, for many of you listening to this, it seems like, well, obvious, but know that obvious, we have to be very precise as we work with our kids and we work with staff on these things. Here's other examples. There's guide on electives and extracurricular activities, athletics, and school events. And here are some of the things that we heard today. Do not allow electives and extracurricular activities in which physical distancing at least 6 feet and face coverings use cannot be maintained. Do not allow aerosol generating activities. This is going to be a new one to many people, including in-person choir, band, and vocal cheerleading. I mean, you could imagine that right there, if you have a child who plays an instrument, you already have questions as to, so what does that mean? Is everything done online? We'll have more information on all of this moving forward. And then considerations such as consider whether extracurricular activities can be conducted outdoors or virtually. I'm going to go through this really quickly on monitoring. There's a lot of guidance on how do we, on health screening, on COVID-19 testing and reporting. What happens if someone becomes infected? What is it that we're supposed to do? How are we posting signs and entrances? How are we identifying the procedures, the processes in place for should somebody get sick, what happens then? We need to have all of that in place before school starts. So as I mentioned, today we received better guidance, better guidance from our county and our health department. And this is the guidance we've been waiting for some time. Yeah, although you'll see later on that we have teams already working, digging deep and getting all plans together. Our goal is to have our plans complete and ready to go by the end of July, if not sooner. So what happens if school open and full online distance learning? So here are the things that we have to ensure. We feel very strongly that we need to continue to support our students' social emotional learning. And we will do that. We have a team already doing a lot of work around that this summer. We need to make sure that we're able to engage our students, that it's not just a screen that they're looking at, but that there's many ways that our teachers could engage kids. And quite frankly, that's an area where we need to provide professional development training for our teachers and our support staff, because there's many multiple ways to engage students, but sometimes we just don't have that background or experience. So the training for teachers is going to be very important. Providing high quality instruction and making sure that our kids have the support that they need. And student learning assessment and support, making sure that we continue to assess our kids and that we're using the assessment data to identify students who need additional support. And through distance learning, the state basically is saying, you could do distance learning, but know that as a district, you have to provide opportunities for kids who are struggling, kids who may have special needs, kids who may be English learners, kids who may just be falling behind, to come in to work in small groups. So it may be distance learning, perhaps we may be going there, but even if we do, we will need to identify our students who need an additional layer of support. And what will the learning model look like? The schedule, I think that this is the question that parents have. We got everything from, during the last 3 months, from it's been outstanding to, you need to step it up, Evergreen School District. And so we understand that. We had to make a shift from one day to another. And so moving forward, what does that schedule look like? How much time will students have with teachers? We will provide more information. It is still in development. There's a lot of work that has been done already, but we're not ready to roll it out. But yes, your children can expect to have a schedule. You can expect that we will have other requirements coming from the state. For example, attendance. Our students understanding that you may be at home, but guess what? You still need to show up and you still need to be involved and you're still in school. You may be sitting in a part, some part in your home, but know that it's class time. And then for us as a district, also requirements on how we roll out our instruction minutes, all of that. In the past, the state was waived PE minutes, for example. The state is going to be providing more guidance in making sure that there's an accountability, not just for us as a district, but also for our students, making sure that they're showing up and that they understand that going to school means that they actually show up and they're engaged and they're involved. So that's the online distance learning model. There's also what we call the hybrid model, the blended model, where students come to school part of the day, some days during the week, and some days during the week they're at home. What this model does is that because of social distancing, you can imagine we can't possibly bring an entire class to school because they'd be too close to each other. We wouldn't be able to have ensure that there was social distancing. So in a blended model, children, we would have an A-B group. And so with the same teacher. So you could imagine like in elementary, for example, you have the same cohort. So you would have a classroom, a teacher with students, and maybe half of the students come on the A days and and while the kids on the A days are at school, at the physical building, the B group, the other half, is at home doing distance learning. And then on the days that the B group is at home, at school, the A group is at home doing distance learning. So that's the hybrid model. And we're developing a schedule for you to have. That information will be coming as well. I'll mention this at the end of the meeting, but we'll have different opportunities for you to continue to get information. Our next community information session will be on July 21st at 5:30 as well. And that information is actually on our last slide. And you'll have other opportunities to be updated as to how this looks like in the coming weeks. And I mentioned that one day, and I'll keep my fingers crossed that it will be sooner than later, that one day our schools will be able to open without any restrictions. That is not an option for us in the fall. Okay. However, when schools do open with no restrictions, we know very well that we will need to improve on our past practices. We know very well that we will need to increase the proficiency of our staff in instructional technology, because at any moment, schools can close again and we need to be prepared. And we also know that the social emotional needs, the well-being of our students, that is something that we need to continue to work on, whether we have kids showing up at school or learning at home. So what's our approach? I want you to know that beyond this meeting, we have different opportunities for stakeholders to give input. One, we have this community input sessions. The next one is on July 21st at 5:30. We also have and you'll learn a little bit more about an advisory committee that we put together. It's called the Teaching and Learning and Safe Environments Advisory Committee. And these meetings will be open to the community. The first, if I may add, the first 30 minutes. So those meetings are every Wednesday, and the committee meets from 4:30 on, about 2 hours typically. But the first, starting at 4:30, but at 4, the community will be able to go in and voice out any questions, concerns that they would like the committee to know that needs to be addressed. So there's that opportunity. And the other opportunity is focus groups. The most, the people we need to hear from are our students. And we understand that. What do kids think? What do they feel? What have they experienced? That is an important variable. And so we have focus groups that we will have meetings with students, asking them about their ideas, their feelings, their perceptions, their experiences, what they're going through, and taking that information. Really, we want to value their voice as we develop our plans as well. Okay, so what's our process and what is our focus? I mentioned to you that we have the Superintendent's Teaching and Learning and Safe Environments Committee. So this is a committee of stakeholders. We have parents, we have staff, teachers, we have classified support staff, we have principals, we have district office people who meet every Wednesday. And what they do basically, it's a committee that listens to all the different groups that are actually digging into the weeds, essentially doing the work, the committees that are doing the work in planning for the reopening of schools. So we have 3 committees. We have the Educational Services Committee. This is a committee whose focus is on teaching and learning, including online distance learning, including on-site, the hybrid model. This is a committee that considers all things related to teaching and learning. It considers also the curriculum, the supports through social emotional learning, and any professional development. That group has been doing a lot of work already, and we're going to get an update about the work that they're doing. We also have another subcommittee. It's called the Facilities and Pupil Services Subcommittee. And so the focus for this subcommittee is on health and safety. They look at facilities, they look at space, technology, nutrition services, maintenance and operations of school facilities, transportation, all those things that are so relevant. Health and safety is part of this committee as we look at how all the measurements that we need to take, the active steps that we need to take. So lots of folks involved in this committee, including our maintenance and operations staff, our transportation staff, our nurses, our counselors, etc. The last committee is the Human Resources Committee, subcommittee. And this subcommittee deals with staffing, contract agreements, transfers, layoffs, school trainings for teachers on newly established principles, regulations, and protocols related to COVID-19. And so this is a committee that is working as well to get more information. I'm not going to go through a lot of information detail on the superintendent's teaching and learning in safe environments advisory committee. However, I want you to know that this is the big committee, right? This is the advisory committee that all the other subcommittees report to. And the main purpose of this committee, the main charge that this committee has, is to provide feedback and recommendations on how the district can best meet the needs of students using the guideline principles in the district's work to address these principles. So each meeting, the subcommittees, educational services, facilities and pupil services, and human resources, those committees report to this committee and give updates. This is the work that we're doing. These are the considerations we're having. And you'll see later on that each of the subcommittees actually has different teams. To give you an example, the educational services subcommittee, just looking at teaching and learning, has to look at elementary different than middle school, simply because middle school you have kids who go to 6 periods, and elementary that's not the case. And so this is a committee that becomes fully informed on all health and safety guidelines. This is a committee that looks at recommendations related to potential areas of school operations that will likely be impacted by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. They become familiar with how the district will support health and safety, physical distancing, instructional programs. So this committee gives a lot of feedback, and it's an opportunity too for all the other subcommittees to come to one place to report out, so that we could see how how all the work really is, how everything is fitting together, and it helps us avoid having silos. We want to be sure that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. Briefly looking at the Facilities and Pupil Services Subcommittee. This committee focuses on health and safety, on facilities, on space, technology, nutritional service, maintenance and operations, transportation, etc. This committee evaluates the physical space to support safety, physical distancing, and to stabilize cohorts as much as possible. And they will develop a continuum of scheduling options to support physical distancing. They will prepare for potential school closures and reopening in the event that we have confirmed cases. This committee's charge is also to identify a safe process to feed students and to develop a continuum. I actually have this already in another area. They also, in this committee, we have lots of participants. We have teachers, principals, custodians, bus drivers, nutrition services staff, technology staff, district support staff, nurses. You can see that while in most years, this is a time that staff is having their vacation, this is a year where staff is coming in and putting a lot of time to make sure that our kids can come back to a safe school in the fall. The Educational Services Committee has the following charge. They take recommendations from the Health Department to identify the instructional models, including the daily schedules for on-campus and online distance learning instruction. This committee also determines the instructional model that will be utilized based on site capacity. I've got to say that there are districts who came out and said we're doing distance learning from the get-go, and I suppose we could have done that and just said, this is where we're going. But I couldn't do that, at least for myself, in good conscience without evaluating the feasibility of being able to bring kids back to school. So while the committees are working, they may come to a point where they find out yes, we can do a hybrid model, or perhaps they may come to a point where the data shows that we're not gonna be able to pull it off. Right now, that work is happening. And so if for some reason we come to you and say, as a community, we will do, I'll just throw this out as an example, doesn't mean this is what we're doing, so please don't read into it. But if we at one point say to you, in middle school, we cannot bring children back in a hybrid model, we are doing distance learning, it will not end there. I need to be able to provide a reason and be able to say, here are limitations, here are the things that are obstacles, If we want to maximize the safety of our students, these are the variables that would not allow us to do that. So I know that this process is taking a little bit longer than perhaps in other areas, but we want to be sure that we are looking at all the variables, and that when we come to you with our final recommendations to the board and our final decisions as to how we move forward, that it's something that is based not just on instinct, but it's mostly based on data. So sorry, I went off on a little tangent there, but the Educational Services Committee's charge is also to design a system to support our students who are struggling. You know, we do have English learners in our district. We have kids who are homeless, kids who are our special education students. We have kids who are struggling. We want to make sure that we focus on equity and opportunity for all kids. And we also want to be sure that we develop and implement a professional development plan to support a hybrid model and an online distance learning model. So this committee is also working on that. And we have all sorts of people working on this committee, from nurses to counselors to social workers, teachers, principals, district staff, you name it, a ton of people putting a lot of good hours. And the last committee that we have is a Human Resources Committee, and their charge is to focus on anything really related to staffing, contract agreements, transfers, layoffs, etc. So for example, staffing, you know, that there may be situations where, for example, life happens. I know that in the last 3 months, I remember talking to a teacher who had a scheduled surgery. Well, guess what? We needed to make sure that the sub coming in was well prepared. Human Resources is the committee that looks at how do we have a team of substitute teachers ready for when somebody is not able to show up to work. Those people need to be ready. They need to be trained. They need to understand how we operate under the COVID conditions. So that's in the Human Resources area. Their charge is also to provide training on any new established procedures, regulations, from protocols related to COVID-19, and really to develop plans for staff members who are at risk and who are resistant to returning to work because maybe they have a health condition. We are gonna find that we have some staff members who are not able to come to physically to work, and might those people be the ones providing some of the distance learning there. I'm sure we'll be able to find a role for them. So Human Resources is a very important group, and we have a lot of people working there as well. And thank you for bearing with me. I know I've been talking for a while, but this is all really important information for you to have. I want to provide some updates, and we have some folks who are going to give you an update as to what's going on within their subcommittees. But letting you know that in the Facilities and Pupil Services Subcommittee, then we have 23 members. In fact, I'm thinking we added a couple more. And this committee, you've got food services, you've got school and district sites, you got transportation. And then with the Pupil Services area, we have health and safety. On the Ed Services Committee, we got 30 people who are involved in the planning. And within that committee, that breaks up into different teams. You know, we have the elementary team, we've got the middle school team, we've got the special education team, we have a team that deals with social emotional planning, and we also have a team that wants to make sure that we continue to focus on equity. And then in the Human Resources Committee, we have 11 people, 11 members, and working on staffing and trainings and looking at contract agreements. So at this time, I believe our team leads, with each subcommittee will be talking about what they're doing to give you a brief update as to what's happening within their own subcommittees, team, within their subcommittees and teams that they have. I'll stop sharing the screen. Sam, I believe you have something, right?
I do.
Okay.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Rick Navarro. I'm the Director of Operations, leading the Facilities Committee, along with Patrina, Facilities Committee and Pupil Services. Our committee is charged with focusing on health and safety for all our facilities, looking at space, nutrition services, maintenance and operations of school facilities, transportation. We're evaluating physical spaces to support the safety of our students and staff, physical distancing, and stabilizing cohorts as much as possible. The committees are made up of, we have 19 members in the committee, and it's made up of bus drivers, supervisors, administrators, principals, teachers, CSEA representative, custodians, CNS assistants. We divided the committees into 3 subcommittees to form food services, transportation, and facilities. It's a lot of work to handle just by one person, and I think dividing it into 3 has been helping. Currently, we're reviewing reopening schools in 3 different phases. We're looking at the planning phase, and then we'll do the preparing and implementing phase. Next slide. So you'll see there, broken it down to the different subcommittees. We're currently working on a hybrid schedule, and not only just looking at the hybrid schedule, how we pivot back and forth from distance learning or just going in full time. The other thing we're looking at is custodial team cleaning. We're looking at class sizes to see if it's functional, 12 to 16 students per class. So we've looked at different models for different sites. Different sites have different sites classrooms. And then minimizing access to other location sites to minimize exposure to other cohorts that may be on the site. Food services is assessing feeding students in a hybrid schedule also. Some of the things we're looking at is grab and go at classrooms where we have the amount of meals needed for the classroom delivered to the classroom outside, and the students grab their own meal, either on the way out home or staying in the classroom and eating it. We are also looking at grab and go curbside. With the hybrid, we'll have students at home learning, and parents can come to the site and pick up a meal for their students at home. And then sanitizing or hand washing, we're looking at those variables on how to keep everyone their hands clean and free from transmitting any viruses. And then the transportation, we're also assessing how do we take temperature of students if we need to, sanitizing buses and the frequency. Bus capacities, we're looking at bus floor plans. We have 4 different models that we have to model. And then driver personal protective equipment. What do we need specifically, and how do we use it at specific different times? So those are what the items we've been looking at the last, I want to say a week or 2, or even longer. So we've started this a while ago. Any questions? I think the safety and health leader.
Yeah, that's the next one.
Hi, so I'm Katrina Red, and I'm the Director of People Services, and I work with the Health and Safety Committee. My committee is composed of myself, as well as we have a principal on special assignment. I have all 3 district nurses as part of my team. I also have 2 principals, the coordinator of special ed. I have a preschool teacher who works with our SDC students, as well as a RSP teacher. And our team role is to plan for the reopening of schools from the health and safety perspective at the school sites in the classroom. What we're looking at is we're considering all of the necessary equipment, training for staff that will be needed, students and parents training, as well as restrictions when students are back onto campus. We are also looking at any technology needs that are going to be needed for the classroom, as well as social and emotional plans that need to be put in place when school reopens. Kim Keon-Dakian, our Director of Ed Services, also is working with our nurses, and so she also provides input and guidance with our nurses. And the Health and Safety Committee is reviewing all of the above options should school reopen using the hybrid, full distance learning, and fully reopening with restriction models. So we're looking at all 3 models. So at a later point in time, whether we start with the hybrid model or the full distance learning, we will be prepared to fully reopen at some point. And then Sam, if we can just wait under the Ed Services, I'll go over the Special Ed Committee.
Okay. So go on to the next education services.
Yes.
All right.
Good evening. My name is Tanya Trim, and I'm one of the directors of educational services. And my charge is to work with a team of 19 members, which is a very balanced team of administrators, teachers, a nurse. We have folks on from informational services, our tech TOSA, and a library media assistant. Our team, because of its size, has divided itself into two smaller teams, with one team working on our distance learning plan and the other team working on a hybrid model instructional plan, which will allow for a seamless transition between models based on current conditions. We are currently reviewing promising practices, instructional models, and the current health and safety guidelines. The team is also considering instructional needs for our specific student groups, our English learners, special ed students, and students that are requiring additional intervention supports. The team is also assessing technology needs of our staff and our students. We are also working on determining what type of professional development needs our staff have, what our students and parents need in terms of orientation workshops. That includes Google Classroom, Hangouts, Zoom, and other platforms that will be needed to ensure that students are able to assess the curriculum and have their needs met. So we have a very large charge ahead of us. We've been working diligently. We have about 5 additional meetings, and we'll have a very solid plan in place. That concludes elementary.
Okay, so I think at this time we have Ms. Kinedekian. Kim, are you next?
I am, yes.
Okay.
Sam, would you advance up to the middle school slide? There it is. Hello, everyone. I'm Kim Kiani Dekian. I am one of the directors of educational services, and one of the teams that I am facilitating is the middle school subcommittee. And within that committee, there are 12 of us, representatives from all 3 of our middle schools in both administration and teachers, pretty balanced team. Our goal and role here is to plan for the reopening of school, and we're looking at it through the lens, of course, of health and safety and the lens of middle school, which, as you can imagine, is a bit of a challenge when we talk about protecting students and staff, and the fact that our middle schools are significantly larger and have students who normally would rotate between 6 teachers. We are working to very quickly and as deeply as possible. We're assessing the instructional models that are available to us. We're looking at all of the health and safety guidelines and piecing the puzzle together for 2 complete models. We are going to have prepared a complete distance learning model and a complete hybrid model, so that throughout the coming months we can move between the 2 models as needed and under the guidance of the Department of Public Health and the County Office of Education. We are taking into consideration many of the things that Tanya mentioned, and in fact we are aligning with the elementary team quite a bit so that we can bring as cohesive of a model as possible to families. We will be looking into and planning the professional development for our teachers and our families, our special populations of students, and assessing and planning for technology needs for everyone involved. So as Tanya said, this is a very large project. We appreciate your patience and understanding while we figure out the details. We want this to be as clean and as helpful as possible, but at the same time, we have to keep all of the health and safety guidelines in mind and make sure that our kids are being educated to the best of our ability under the circumstances. So Sam, if you could go to my second slide. I also facilitate the wellness team, and the wellness team is made up of our mental health professionals, such as the district social workers and our counseling interns, of which we will have employed 10 for the coming year, as well as our middle school counselors and our IEP counselor. Our role is to consider all of the social, emotional, mental health, and self-care needs for students, for staff, and for families. So we will also be considering both the distance learning and hybrid model and the implications of mental health and wellness for everyone involved. We are developing an extensive ongoing resource page that will be utilized by all community members. It will be organized by user categories such as student, staff, or family. It will be organized by grade level, and it will be the resources will be separated out into social emotional needs. The resources will consist of everything out there, such as books, web pages, articles, YouTube videos, apps, podcasts, and any other media available that could be useful to anyone in our community. And that is an ongoing project that was started when we originally were sent home in March, and they will continue to be a source of support for families and students and staff throughout the coming year. That completes mine.
Sam, can you go to the special education slide? So I also oversee the special ed committee, and this is composed of our SLP, or speech and language pathologist, as well as our coordinator of special education, principal on special assignment. We also have a special ed instructional assistant, a resource teacher, SDC teacher, and a principal. And our team role is to identify what learning looks like for special needs students at different levels, whether it be on an IEP or a 504, or just a student that receives some sort of accommodations. And so what we are tasked to do is to identify supports for staff that provide direct service to special needs students. And also we are trying to identify what supports may be needed for our parents, and we are monitoring the services. We just recently began to meet. We are a small but mighty group. Our team is considering what is listed above as far as the services go, and we're looking at the hybrid or the distance learning model. We are planning we're planning for the reopening of schools with our students in special day classes, and that's what our team focus was on this week, and that was our task. And next week we'll be reviewing scheduling options, and we will branch out to other areas that we have to work with special needs students and how to support their staff and family members and provide supports to everyone. And we're looking at students on RSP, speech services only, as well as 504 accommodations, in addition to IEPs. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. My name is Cesar Chirica. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, and I am in charge of the Human Resources Committee. It is really our job to take all the work of all the other subcommittees and incorporate that into negotiating with both unions, bargaining agreements that kind of take effect to these changing working conditions. For that reason, we're comprised of many different types of employees from our district, from teachers, school psychologists, principal, district nurse, health clerk, library media aide, a school secretary, business office personnel, and again, both presidents from both union groups. Next slide, please. So the charge of our subcommittee is to develop training for employees on safety-related protocols when returning to work. That is paramount to the entire district, not just to our subcommittee, but really want to make sure that employees can come back, and if they come back, it is as safely as possible. Secondly, we're working on creating a survey for employees on what their needs are for returning to work. Certainly there's going to be some employees who are in at-risk groups, and also employees who who will volunteer to do distance learning. That's something that they're good at, or if they require training to do that. So again, that'll address a need, because there are going to be some students who only want to do distance learning. So we can find a way to match those teachers and students up to provide that distance learning. Again, we are beginning to start the framework that will eventually lead to bargaining new agreements with both employment groups. And again, because anytime there is a change in working conditions, that is something that is subject to bargaining between the district and the employee groups. Again, part of our job is to gather and solicit input from various employee groups that will assist us in the planning of reopening schools. And finally, again, any employees that need training or retraining, if there's some, for instance, if there's a teacher that only wants to do distance learning, again, they will need to be trained to do that full time, and any other type of staff. And again, anything like that, again, is subject to negotiations with either of the labor groups. Thank you.
Okay, so I believe this is, thank you to all the team leads for providing information. Gives our community an indication of all the work that's taking place. At this time, we want to talk a little bit about communication. At no time in history do I believe communication is so important. Our families are eager to find out. They're nervous, our staff members as well. And so we have a fantastic team working on communication, and that is being led by Ms. Johanna Villarreal in the superintendent's office. So she'll address this part.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Johanna Villarreal. I'm the Admin and Board Services Director, and you probably see my emails on a weekly basis or sometimes every other day. So I am in charge of communications here in Evergreen. So our team is comprised of me and the superintendent's office staff, Amy Schaefer and Jessica Villalobos. And we have two website developers, Stacy Bark and Susan Huang, and one communication consultant, Heather McGowan. And our team actually had worked before together when we were going through the school consolidation not too long ago. So we are very familiar with our style, and we've worked really hard on putting together our webpage for school reopening plan. So our role is to ensure that the district's reopening communications are clear and transparent and engage stakeholders in the process. So as you know, we are utilizing all our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and also weekly emails through School Messenger, and also our website. So we try to put all the information out there, so it doesn't matter where the community goes, they will see the information that they need. So for the messaging, and you can call it a slogan, for school reopening in the fall, we thought it was important to have a very positive messaging. So we chose Safe Together, being safe together as a community, learning, teaching, working, and schools reopening website will be launched very soon. So that will be announced on the website, and also I will be sending an email as well. And all the social media platforms will be, it will be posted there as well. So for the hashtag, we thought what we will be doing is we will be using hashtag ESD Safe Together. So when you type that up, you know, that's also another way of getting the updates and news that you'd like to get. So utilizing communication channels to identify where public health, Santa Clara County of Education guidelines will shape the work moving forward. So obviously for us, it is important that we keep that in mind. So we do get regular updates from the public health, Santa Clara Public Health, and also the Santa Clara County of Education. So with all of the planning, that comes first. So if I miss anything, Heather McGowan is also here. Heather, would you like to add anything?
There's nothing else that I am adding at this time, but just want to let people know that once we have the website launched, that will be a great place to find updated information, answers to frequently asked questions, including those that have come up through chat and the Q&A during this session, and those that are coming in via email as well.
Okay, thank you. So please don't hesitate to email me if should you have any questions. My email is jvillarreal@eesd.org. But for school reopening, we would like to, there's also an exclusive email address for that, which is safetogether@eesd.org, and that will be posted on the website as well.
Okay, wonderful. Can I get my screen back up, or maybe you could exit sharing screen?
Sure can. Give me 1 second.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Computer.
Okay. And I just realized after reading the side comments that I was not on full presentation mode, and so my slides were not showing as well. And so just know that the slide deck will be available on our website likely by tomorrow. And so for future meetings, I'll make sure that I have on full screen that I have my presentation on full screen. So this slide here just shows you a little glimpse as to what that website will look like, our Safe Together ESD Safe Together web page. And as you can see, there'll be information. You'll have news and announcements, the different models, the process. There you'll have an opportunity to click on any of those links, including a Q&A link, because as we look at your questions on the sidebar area, we are taking those questions and we are turning them into a Q&A portion that will add to the Q&A section of this website. If you leave your email, we will send you a reply as well. So at this time, this is the end of this presentation. Our next community information meeting will be on Tuesday, July 21st at 5:30 p.m. And by then, we hope to have a lot more information. Things are moving really quickly. And now that we have more guidance from the public health as well as the state and the county office of education, we feel very confident that things are going to move even faster. One question that is out there, and I want to make sure that I address, is when is the first day of school? No matter what model or anything, our first day of school is the same. It is on August 19th. So that is the end of this presentation. Thank you all for joining us today. Have a wonderful evening.